Hello and welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life with your host Avik. This podcast is all about exploring the latest research, sharing personal stories, and providing personal tips for improving our mental health and well-being. Each episodes will be joined by experts in the field of mental health, as well as individuals who have experienced the transformative power of a healthy mind firsthand. Together, we will dive into a range of topics from managing stress and anxiety to building resilience and cultivating happiness. So, join us on this journey to discover new ways to take care of our minds, bodies, and souls. And let's work together to create a healthier, happier world one episode at a time. So, let's get started. Hello and welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today we have a remarkable guest, Sarah Card. So, welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you, Avik. I'm happy to be here.
Great, lovely. So, Sarah, before we start our conversation, I would love to mention this to all of our listeners that Sarah is an accomplished writer, raised and educated in New York and England. So, has a powerful story to share about the resilience, love, and the strength of community. So, Shara and her husband, Ben, raised their four sons in Ohio and before becoming empty nesters and moving to the Florida's Keys. However, the onset of the COVID 19 pandemic and Ben's severe health issues necessitated their staying in Florida for all 2020. And her journey as Ben's caregiver during this challenging time is detailed in her upcoming book, On My Way Back to You, one couple's journey through catastrophic illness to healing and the hope. So, in today's episode, Sarah will discuss her experiences transitioning into the role of a caregiver, the hard lessons she learned along the way, and how she managed to stay positive and in control of her emotions. So, she will also definitely share about the insights on the importance of community support when it feels like your world is falling apart. So, Sarah's story is not just about illness, but it's about the love, resilience, and the hope. So, with this, let's welcome again to the show, Sarah. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you.
Great, great. So, Sarah, to start with, if you can share your initial reaction when you realized the severity of Ben's health issues and the impact it would have on your lives.
Well, my initial reaction and Ben's were pretty much okay. It's our turn, and this is something that we have to deal with, and so we will. His initial symptoms were really mild. It was an autoimmune disease. Okay. His fingers were swollen, and on occasion they would change color. And the doctors said, "This is not curable. It will migrate through his body, and all we'll be able to do is treat symptoms as they come up." And dealing with those symptoms early on was just like, oh, okay, so he wears gloves, or we watch the salt in his diet, and we'll get through this. And then it got to his GI tract, and he dropped 25 pounds in about 3 months. And we realized that we needed to, not that we needed to pay more attention, but that we needed to buck up and prepare for the road ahead. And so it, over the course of several years, it went from his GI tract to his joints to his eyes, nose, and throat, and finally got to his heart and necessitated his getting a pacemaker. And the pacemaker could only keep up with the autoimmune for about 9 months before they said his real challenge and the only thing that will save him will be getting a heart transplant. So that's what we were working on when he ended up in kidney failure 2 months after 2 weeks after the world shut down with the COVID pandemic, and he ended up in the hospital. So my course as a caregiver was pretty there was a steep learning curve, but it went really slowly to start. And then suddenly I was in charge of driving everywhere, handling his medications, doing IV antibiotics that winter before he ended up in the hospital. And then I couldn't do anything because while he was in the hospital, I couldn't visit. So he was away for 10 weeks. He was very visibly dying when he left the house. And somehow, miraculously, he got a heart and he came home to me. But there was another stutter step. A week after the heart transplant, they called and said, has anyone mentioned anything about this broken left hip? Which had actually happened on my watch. He'd been so ill that he was sleeping hardly at all. And he got up in the middle of the night to go use the bathroom and fell asleep on his way back to the couch where he was sleeping at that point because he was in fear of falling out of bed and getting hurt. So he went over like a tree. And the only thing I ever knew about it before they diagnosed it was that he was taking ibuprofen because his hip hurt. So he came home in a wheelchair and dependent on opioids. So it was a journey. And at that point, I was his full-time caregiver. He'd come home from 10 weeks in the hospital where he'd had the undivided attention of doctors and nurses and nutritionists and janitors and people cleaning the bathroom and bringing him hot meals 3 times a day, to just me because it was the COVID pandemic. And he was unable to walk. We got pain management advice, so we knew what to do about handling his dependence on oxycodone until he could get his hip replaced, which was 2.5 months later. And then he had to learn to walk again. So it was a long road, but we did it together and somehow managed to find our way back to where we approximately where we were.
Understood. So, I mean, what are some of the most, I'd say, like, how do you manage the stress and the anxiety that came with caring for Ben, and especially with the added pressure of the COVID-19 lockdown?
I tried to break things down into small, manageable pieces. There was a lot of, in the thick of it, before he went to the hospital, it was just taking things hour by hour and trying to keep us on as straight a road as I could. But once he was in the hospital and I was advocating for him from a distance, it was there was a lot of breathing, a lot of breathing in the good and breathing out the bad. A friend had recommended to me shortly after the pandemic began or was declared. A friend had forwarded me an email of a meditation series that was produced by Deepak Chopra and Oprah Winfrey that they were giving to the world for free for this wretched time we were all facing. And when she first forwarded that to me, I didn't have the time, or I couldn't make the time to look it up. But as soon as Ben went into the hospital, I did. And it was amazing to just take 25 minutes each morning, if I could do it in the morning. Sometimes I didn't get to it till the afternoon, but to sit down and listen to their message and meditate on that message. And the day that I meditated on the power of hope is real, which was a week. Ben had been in the hospital for a week. That's the day we got the call that he was on the transplant list. And it spoke to me. It connected. It felt like it connected me with the universe and gave me strength that I needed to face those days. There were other days that were a lot harder. A week after he went on the list, he was so unstable, they took him off. And that was Easter weekend. Then somehow, miraculously, he got back on the list. And there were just a lot of ups and downs. Between his finally getting the heart and the challenges of his adjusting to the heart. But the meditation was helpful, and the breathing exercises were helpful, and long walks. And I tend to journal when I am very stressed, and I'll take whatever my problem is to my journal, and I try by getting it out on paper, similarly to breathing out the bad, to get the frustration and the stress out onto the pages of my journal. And before I finish an entry in my journal, I try to bring it around to something positive and uplifting that can help me move forward. And sometimes it's something as, it sounds silly, but as silly as simple as writing, "Let's go, me. Come on, let's do this. Time to put on your big girl pants or pull up your bootstraps." So it sounds like little stuff, but if it gets your head in the right place, it's really, really valuable for how enabling you to move forward.
Got it. Got it. So, and how did your faith, grit, and grace play a role in navigating through these tough times?
Grit was for the really tough moments, in terms of the tough hands-on. I don't want to do this, but I need to do this, kind of his IVs, changing bandages. Then I really needed grit. Grace was as I was receiving bad news or news of a step backwards. And faith was just that on some level, whether I understood it or not, all was well and all would be well, even if it turned out that Ben were to die, and which was obviously not what I wanted. But even if he had died, I kept telling myself that I would be able to handle it, and that for some reasons I didn't understand this was how it was supposed to be. So just things that help you get from hour to hour just make such a tremendous difference.
Exactly true. Yeah. So okay, another thing is like what were some of the hardest lessons that you have learned during this journey?
Perfection isn't everything. In fact, I'm less a perfectionist now than I was. But the perfectionist in me, the part where I didn't know he had a broken hip, that just felt like such a fail. But if we had known about his hip, if the hospital had known about his hip, I mean, they didn't figure it out either. So it wasn't just me. If it had been figured out, he would never have been a candidate for transplant. And he wasn't a perfect candidate for transplant. And so perfection isn't the thing. If it hadn't been COVID, he wouldn't have gotten the heart, because the only people, we forget that 4 years ago, we didn't have COVID tests. I mean, you could go drive through a parking lot and let someone scratch your brain with a cotton swab, but you didn't get the results for several days. And so the only people being taken into the OR were people who were dying because they'd been in a car accident, they had a gunshot wound, or they happened to be in the hospital already when an organ became available for their transplant. And that's where Ben was. So perfection is nice, but it's not a be-all and end-all thing. That was a very hard lesson for me to accept. And in fact, that's part of why I ended up writing the book on my way back to you, because I needed to process, after everything we'd been through, that things that I had believed beforehand proved not to be the case. And I needed to come to terms with that and understand it a little better. So other hard lessons, just, you can do more than you think you can. Sometimes telling yourself you're going to get through this is all you need to get through something. Sounds very simplistic, but it can be what you need to hear at the time.
Exactly. So, what advice would you give to others who find themselves in the similar caregiving role?
Don't hide behind any barriers. Be cautiously open about your vulnerabilities. Don't hesitate to ask for help. Be gracious and accepting of other people's attempts to reach out. There can be awkward moments when they're trying to offer assistance but don't know how to say that or what to do. appreciate that they're trying to do their best to be supportive. When people ask how things are going, don't exaggerate, and don't sugarcoat it, because you don't want to have to walk back things if circumstances change. And be kind and supportive and forgiving of yourself. There's no way to do this perfectly. A friend suggested the other day, and I wish someone had suggested it to me in the moment, keep a list of things that people can do for you, because it's really hard when someone says, oh, please let me know if there's anything I can do. And you just go, oh, I will. But then you don't want to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, here's something you could do. But if you have a list of things that people could do, like, if you're free today to take my car and go fill it with gas, that would be a huge help. Just simple. Or the next time you're at the grocery store, when there's a buy one, get one sale, could you grab some canned tomatoes for me? Whatever. Just keep a list, and don't hesitate to refer to it when someone says, what can I do? And give them the people. I mean, they don't ask expecting you to say nothing. They ask because they really genuinely want to help. So that was the thing I wish I'd thought of before. So.
Got it. So that's really, really great. And how do you think, I mean, how important was community support during this time? Like, how did you engage with your community?
Well, it was COVID, which made it a little tough. And I kept hoping that the hospital's protocol policy, that they would allow me to at least have a compassionate visit. There were moments where I knew Ben was going to die, and I really just wanted to be able to go say goodbye to him and thank you for the life he'd shared with me and all the lessons he'd taught me. But in terms of the community, in a way, I was blessed that it was COVID, because I had my friends and neighbors who were right there, who were doing things like dropping off flowers at my doorstep or making masks for me. This is back when we were still thinking that all of the commercially available masks needed to be reserved for medical personnel, and that we could still have effective masks that we were making for ourselves. So I'd open the door and there'd be a new mask for me. Or I'd go for a walk and I'd come home and someone would have left my next meal on my kitchen table for me. But also because it was COVID, I was doing Zoom. My first Zoom call was the night that Ben went into the hospital, which to me is trying to remember what my life was like before Zoom is like trying to remember what it was like to not be able to read. It's just such a go-to thing anymore. But because of Zoom, I could be back in touch with my book group from Ohio, college friends, the women who I'd roomed with my freshman year in college. We all talked about every 10 days. We'd have a Zoom call. Ben's college roommates were talking to me via Zoom all the time. My children, who were spread all across the country, Ben's and my sons, were in touch with me via Zoom. So community was just really, really important. It gave me a reason to get up in the morning. And as Ben's hospital stay progressed and as his recovery journey progressed over the course of the summer of 2020, I was writing emails to close family and friends to keep everybody in the loop. And that helped me get my head in the right place, made sure everybody was on the same page. And that also strengthened the community of those people who were on that email chain, all communicating with each other, all communicating with me. And it helped very much keep my heart and head moving forward.
Lovely. So, also, like, moving forward, like, how has this experience shaped your outlook on the future, both personally and as a couple?
Well, I've talked about letting go of perfection a little bit, but also in the before times, everything's so normal. You have each other's back. You're one another's sounding boards. You laugh together. You snipe at each other. You kiss and make up. You're friends, and sometimes you ignore each other. And then just when you least expect it, the before times are over and you're in the thick of a crisis that's completely different. Finding our way back from that was a collection of small moments. after our 10 weeks apart, just being able to hold his hand was my everything, even as he was in excruciating pain because of the broken hip. Witnessing his wonder at being outside again after being in the hospital for so long. And he is an outdoor guy. So that his resilience and spirit sustained him to get back outside while he was in those very sanitary conditions was an inspiration. To see his face as he watched the wind make the trees swing in the breeze and listen to the birds. I mean, all those things, we were just so aware of each other and things that we'd never really paid attention to before. And we're back now 4 years later to occasional sniping, but we also, it's so easy to pull us out of it by remembering what it meant for him to learn how to walk and how to go back upstairs on his own, the independence that came with that. And there's part of physical therapy that's called reciprocal steps, which is, I mean, first of all, you're doing steps, you're putting up with the good, following with the bad, up with the good, following with the bad, one step at a time, both feet. But when you can do reciprocal steps, you're going left, right. And that was such a wonderful day when he came home from physical therapy and said, look at me doing reciprocal steps. So now when we get snippy with each other, if one of us steps back and takes a breath and just goes, hey, look at me doing reciprocal steps, it takes the tension out of the moment and reminds us of how far we've come and what really is important. It's just, it reframes everything in ways that are indescribable.
Exactly. Great. So, before we wrap up, like, what message would you like to leave for our listeners with about the importance of resilience, community, and love in overcoming the adversity?
There is always something for which to be grateful. It can be the sun coming up every morning. It's a new miracle, a new beginning. It never hurts to give yourself a pep talk. That's always extremely helpful. And then if you're an organ donor already, thank you. If you're not, please consider being so and letting your loved ones know that would be your intention. We lost a dear friend 27 years ago. It was sudden, but her family knew that she wanted her organs to be donated, and it impacted the lives of multiple other families. In our case, I believe that the donor for Ben, that family making that amazing decision in what has to have been their darkest moments, they provided a miracle, not just for us, but for 4 other families. And the ripple effect is amazing. And we will be forever grateful. And I just learned a few days ago that a friend whom I've known for 3 or 4 years, I did not know that she had made that decision when her son was brain dead a while ago. And she, to have this connection with her now, to understand that she knows what a difference her son's heart made to another family, just really opened our hearts to her and has redefined our friendship with her. Organ donation is a miraculous thing.
That's really lovely, I would say. Yeah, really great. Yeah. So, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your insights and journey with us, and also a special thank to you for this and the insights on maintaining a positive mindset during the adversity. So, for the listeners, I would love to mention, like, if you have enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with everyone. So, for more about Sarah and her upcoming book, On My Way Back to You, check on the show notes. And also, I would request Sarah, like, if someone wants to connect with you, how they can connect.
Through the website, which is On My Way Back, www.onmywaybacktoyou.com, and the publicist will forward stuff to me. And I've really enjoyed being on Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. Thank you so much for your podcast and your service.
Lovely, lovely, really great. So stay tuned, dear listeners, for our next episodes as we continue to exploring the new ways to enhance your mental and physical well-being. So take care, and we will see you in the next episode on Healthy Mind and Healthy Life. Thank you so much.